10 years ago, roughly half of Indiana's college graduates remained in the state upon graduation. This number was even lower for STEM degrees, as many of these students found opportunities and offers in major tech hubs. It was in the face of this problem that TechPoint launched the Xtern program, a 10-week internship program that employs hundreds of college students in roles at local tech companies. In this circuit mini-series, 10 Years of Talent, TechPoint interviews the major players in Indiana's tech landscape. From talent organizations to the people who were there at the beginning of Xtern, we look back at the past decade of Indiana's talent initiative and look towards the future of Indiana's tech workforce.
Steven, thanks so much for sitting down with us today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And you couldn't have picked a cooler spot.
Well, I know. The backdrop is not too shabby today.
Yeah. Very fun.
Well, Steven, I'm so excited for the role that you're starting at the Orr Fellowship and excited to talk through what you see in the future of the position and of the organization. So let's start, for those that might not be so familiar with the Orr Fellowship, give us the basics and rundown of what the organization is and what the mission looks like.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So Orr Fellowship, it's actually been around for a really long time. We're 20 plus years old. We've been doing pretty much the same thing over that course of time. And Orr Fellowship's mission is to recruit and develop the next generation of entrepreneurs and business leaders to Indianapolis. And so functionally what that means is we're finding the best and the brightest coming off of college campuses, both in Indiana and across the state and the nation. And partnering them with dynamic companies in the Indy area that are working on meaningful problems. So those can be software companies, insurance companies, financial firms, medical companies, all of those companies that are working on meaningful problems that are willing to take on these high potential leaders and develop them into the next generation for Indy. So like I said, we've been doing that for 20 years and there's no signs of slowing down for us here. And it's just really exciting to be here, partnering the best and the brightest with Indiana's biggest opportunities as a state.
It's awesome. I certainly have loved getting to work with the Orr Fellowship over my time at TechPoint, and many of my closest coworkers, friends have come through the Orr Fellowship network. It's an incredible group of people. So
I appreciate that. And Orr Fellowship and TechPoint have some close ties. Our board chair, Jim J, actually helped roll TechPoint into CICP, and then Mike Langelier originally was an Orr Fellow, so we think fondly of TechPoint for sure.
Well, we certainly do. Sally Reasoner, who's one of the creators of Xtern, alongside Mike, who's an Orr Fellow alum as well. So we're in good hands, which is a good tip, frankly, to the next question of talking about how the Xtern program for interns and the Orr Fellowship, obviously a 2-year job placement process, could actually collaborate even more. What do you think about that, what that looks like in the future?
I think it's a super exciting prospect, and I think probably to TechPoint and Orr Fellowship shame, we've never done this before. You're crossing your 10-year anniversary. Like I said, we've been doing this for 20 years, and there's very clear through lines between our organizations of impact. And I'm really excited to see externs become Orr Fellows and then move on to the next thing in Indy and consistently take leadership positions here in Indy and the business community and our public institutions and our communities. I think we've seen that historically already, and I think through meaningful partnership between us, we can really drive the impact and the depth of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm really excited about that, and Finalist Day is an excellent first step.
For sure.
Hosting
Why
that
not the
together.
biggest event be at the trial? So.
Absolutely. We started off big with the bang here.
Yeah,
so sure. But I agree. I think the pipeline will really benefit from our collaboration in the years to come, and there's so many cross ties there. I'm curious about your kind of next reflection on this. As you just mentioned, Xtern's going into its 10th year as a program. And so we're looking back a lot and thinking about the talent landscape and how that's changed over the years. Curious about your perspective on that, both from your prior roles and also what you think organizationally the Orr Fellowship has seen over the last 10 years and the landscape changes.
That's a really good question. I think the interesting part of it is that actually nobody knows right now. Coming through COVID, the power dynamic has totally shifted, right? So it was previously with the employer and you had to come to where the jobs were. And with sort of the remote first mentality that a lot of companies have taken on and certainly a lot of employees have taken on, it really shifts the power to the employee to say, well, this is where I want to live, and where I work doesn't really matter anymore.
Yep.
And so we're kind of feeling that out. I think not only us as an organization, but us as a nation and state, trying to figure out what's that really mean and what's that look like. But I think it's going to continue to matter. The community that you're in and like the Hoosier hospitality here in Indiana is something I've even experienced. I moved to Indiana 5 years ago from Arizona and immediately got drawn in and suckered in by that and have really fallen in love with it. Hence my time at Orr Fellowship now. I want more people to experience that. So I think it's going to come down to really where do you want to build a life and like have a meaningful impact. And I think Indiana provides that for people that are willing to work hard and be good to people. So it gets me excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a good point of the COVID transition, and I'm curious what you and your team learned being out on campus this fall in recruitment season. How do you make Indiana be a compelling place for students to consider?
Yeah, it's not necessarily easy when you're competing with like Colorado mountains or the beaches or New York with all it provides, but I think it really comes down to the community, and that's always been a consistent selling point of Orr Fellowship itself, which is a good ego check for me. It's never the programming that I pull off. It's the community and it's the other fellows that are the real value that we're connecting you with, and that community in Indiana at large. So that's really the selling point, is it's always who you're going to get connected with here and the good people you're going to work with. I'm a foodie, so I always try to sell the food scene here in Indiana, and Indy is shocking, like how good it is. I remember my brother coming out to visit me one time and him making a phone call to one of his buddies back home and him being like, no, they actually have like really good food here. Like being surprised and like having to tell these people back in Arizona, they're like, hey, there's actually like not just cornfields. Like, yeah. So I think it has a lot more to provide than people give it credit for. And I think giving them the space to experience that in Indiana to show up as it consistently does is really the goal. It's like, hey, just trust us, trust the process. Like we know what we're talking about, and it's an awesome place to be.
Yeah, I think that is a lot of what our team does out on campus as well with Xtern and the community, and the idea that you can make an impact in a company here in a way that you might get lost in other places in the coasts and stuff, but here you can really drive meaningful change and impact.
Absolutely.
And be a contributor, which is, a big plus.
This isn't to toot my own horn, but it's just like by way of example, like I said, I moved here 5 years ago. Started in a software company called Lessonly, which has deep ties to Orr Fellowship as well. From there, I went to the state and worked in innovation entrepreneurship, and then now here I am at Orr Fellowship, and like been able to increasingly give back and have an impact in each of those roles in bigger and more meaningful ways. And that's just in 5 years. And while that's my story, it could be anybody's if they're willing to come here and put in the work and, like I said, work hard and be good to people. Indiana really responds to that, and I've not been turned down once for a coffee meeting, for any sort of networking. Like, people are willing to help as long as you're willing to ask. Yeah.
It's a really unique component of life here in Indy, which is neat for two transplants to be able to say that and be testaments to it. So it's awesome. Along those lines, what do you think the legacy of the Orr Fellowship has been in attracting and retaining talent now for the city?
Yeah, and I think that's a really compelling question, and one that we were just talking before this about how do you look at the history of what Orr Fellowship and Xtern have done and all of TechPoint's programs and say, what are the outcomes of that? And what are the specific things we can point to? While right now, that can maybe be anecdotal, but we have Orr Fellowship alumni that are in meaningful positions around the state, and even if they leave here, they still are going off and doing great things in other places. So the legacy has been consistent output of incredibly high quality candidates that want to do meaningful work and have an impact wherever they're at, and have an impact outside of just themselves. Like, people that make it into Orr Fellowship, we have a lot of bars and hoops for them to jump through, similar to Xtern, I'm sure, but one of the biggest, most consistent traits of the people that come through is the character. Yeah. And so I would hope that the output is high character, hardworking people that are willing to make places around them better.
Yeah.
So.
Well said. That's a great thing to hope for. Yeah. What do you see as the state's biggest opportunities for growth? Kind of imagining we're sitting down 10 years from now again. Where do you hope we are?
Yeah, that's another good question. Kind coming from my previous life, working at the state, specifically in innovation entrepreneurship, there's just a ton of activity. I think there's the onshoring of all of the activity, specifically in manufacturing, that's previously been in China and other places. That really caught some movement during COVID as the supply chain got so disrupted. I think people getting a little disenfranchised with the coast, again, with like the employee-employer dynamic and being able to live other places. I think Indiana has some real opportunity to make a name for itself. And you're seeing some of that in the semiconductor companies planting deep roots here in like not inexpensive ways. No fab is cheap. Those semiconductor companies are doing it big, but yeah, I just want to see us continue to show up and take a shot at some of these big opportunities that we previously were looked over for because of maybe macroeconomic and the macroeconomic environment. Yeah, I think the game's changed and Indiana has a real shot.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. What about for the Orr Fellowship in particular? What do you think's on the horizon as you're taking the reins of the organization?
Yeah, that's the part that gets me the most excited right now. A finalist day has been something we've been working towards. I'm 3.5 months in now, so something we've been working towards in the entirety of that time. And it's no small task, but I want Orr Fellowship to consistently curate meaningful, transformative, unique experiences for our Orr Fellows that they wouldn't get anywhere else, that set them up to drive change and have impact across their careers, not just when they get to 40 and it's their turn to sort of like step into leadership, but when they're 25, when they're 30, when they're 35 and on, like throughout their lives, I want them to be set up because of their time at Orr Fellowship. And what I want to see at the end of this is I want the leaders of our business institutions, our public institutions, and our communities to be able to trace their roots back to Orr Fellowship. And be able to say that Orr Fellowship was a meaningful part of that trajectory and set it up for them. So that's my goal. And I think the caliber of the alumni sets us up for that, and the caliber we have now and who I know is coming to finalist day tomorrow. We have all the right people, and now it's just executing and setting them up.
That's awesome. I love that, Steven. I can't wait to watch it continue to unfold, and
Same.
glad to be in partnership with you. Yeah,
Yeah, likewise.
Awesome. Well, thanks for chatting with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate it.